The evening sky had turned a deep purple as Gabriela Suarez gathered her papers from her desk. The clock on the wall read 9:37 p.m., another late night at the Justice Department. But the Rodriguez discrimination case wasn't going to build itself. As one of the few Latina federal attorneys handling civil rights violations, Gabriela was used to the long hours and the weight of responsibility that came with her position. "You should go home and get some rest," said Tom, the night security guard, as Gabriela walked through the lobby with her briefcase and coffee mug. "That's the plan," she replied with a tired smile. "Just need to review these witness statements before tomorrow's meeting." The parking garage was nearly empty as Gabriela made her way to her modest sedan. The drive home would take about 30 minutes, enough time to mentally shift from work mode to home mode. She looked forward to kicking off her uncomfortable dress shoes and maybe catching up on that novel she'd been trying to finish for weeks. As she merged onto the highway, Gabriela turned on the radio, keeping the volume low. A soft jazz tune filled the car as she mentally reviewed tomorrow's agenda. The Rodriguez case was gaining traction, and several major news outlets had requested interviews. Her boss had warned her to keep a low profile, but Gabriela knew that public awareness could help push for the systemic changes they were fighting for. Lost in thought, she barely noticed when she took the exit toward her neighborhood. The familiar streets were quiet at this hour, with only the occasional car passing by. Gabriela yawned, looking forward to her bed. The flash of red and blue lights in her rearview mirror snapped her out of her thoughts. Gabriela checked her speedometer. She was going exactly the speed limit. Maybe a taillight was out. She signaled and pulled over to the shoulder, reaching for her glove compartment to retrieve her registration and insurance card. Officer Kevin Radley watched the dark blue sedan pull over. He'd been parked in the shadow of a billboard, finishing his coffee when the car passed. Something about it caught his attention. Nothing specific, just a feeling. After 12 years on the force, Radley trusted his instincts. He called in the license plate and waited for a response before turning on his lights. "Registered to Gabriela Suarez," came the dispatcher's voice. "No outstanding warrants or violations." Radley stepped out of his patrol car, adjusting his belt as he approached the sedan. His hand rested casually near his holster, a habit formed over years of traffic stops. The driver's window rolled down as he approached. "Good evening, officer," Gabriela said, hands visible on the steering wheel, just as she always advised her own clients to do. Radley shined his flashlight directly into her face, making her squint. "License and registration," he said flatly, not bothering with a greeting. "May I ask why I was pulled over?" Gabriela asked politely, maintaining eye contact despite the harsh light. "Taillights out," Radley replied, though this wasn't true. "License and registration," he repeated, his tone hardening. Gabriela nodded. "My registration is in the glove compartment, and my license is in my purse on the passenger seat. I'm going to reach for them now, okay?" Radley didn't respond, just kept the light trained on her face. Something about her calm demeanor irritated him. Most people showed at least a little nervousness during traffic stops. "I'm a federal attorney," Gabriela added as she slowly reached for her purse. "I work for the Justice Department." Radley's expression changed subtly. "Oh, you're a federal attorney? Well, excuse me, Your Honor," he said with a mocking tone. "Didn't realize I was in the presence of someone so important." Gabriela paused, her hand halfway to her purse. The shift in the officer's attitude was concerning, but she kept her voice level. "I'm just letting you know in case you need to contact my office for any reason. What I need is for you to show me your ID without the attitude," Radley snapped. "You people always think you're above the law." The phrase "you people" hung in the air between them. Gabriela had heard those words too many times before in courtrooms in college, even in line at the grocery store. She took a slow, deep breath. "I don't have an attitude, officer. I'm complying with your request." She continued reaching for her purse, moving deliberately. "What's in the bag?" Radley demanded, his hand now resting on his holster. "Just my wallet, phone, and some work papers," Gabriela replied, keeping her movements slow and predictable. "My license is in my wallet." Radley's flashlight beam jumped from her face to her hands to the purse. "Hurry up," he said, despite having just questioned her for reaching for it. Gabriela carefully opened her purse and reached for her wallet. The leather folder had her Justice Department credentials visible alongside her driver's license. As she lifted it out, Radley suddenly grabbed her wrist. "What's that?" "What are you pulling out?" he demanded, his grip painfully tight. It's just my wallet with my ID, Gabriella said, her heart now pounding. You can see it right here. Radley's face hardened. I saw something metal. Put it down now. There's nothing metal, officer. Just my wallet and ID. Gabriella tried to remain calm, but fear was creeping into her voice. The situation was escalating for no reason she could understand. Get out of the car, Radley ordered, pulling at her arm. Officer, please, Gabriella said, wincing at his grip. You're hurting me. I'm just showing you my ID as requested. Another word and I'll charge you with resisting, Radley threatened. His free hand moved to his gun. I'm not asking again. Several cars drove past, their headlights briefly illuminating the scene. Gabriella wondered if anyone would stop, if anyone would witness what was happening. Her training as an attorney told her to comply now and fight later when she was safe. I'll get out, she said, reaching for her seatbelt with her free hand. Please let go of my arm so I can unbuckle my seatbelt. Radley released her wrist but kept his hand on his weapon. Slowly, he warned. Gabriella unbuckled her seatbelt and carefully opened the car door. As she began to step out, her wallet fell from her lap onto the pavement with a soft thud. Gun, Radley shouted, drawing his weapon in one fluid motion. No, Gabriella cried, raising her hands. It's just my wallet, look. The next few seconds seemed to stretch into hours. Gabriella saw the officer's finger move to the trigger. She saw his eyes wide with what looked like a mixture of fear and anger. She heard herself pleading, explaining, her words tumbling out too fast to be understood. The gunshot was deafening in the quiet neighborhood. Gabriella felt a searing pain in her right thigh and collapsed half in, half out of her car. The world tilted sideways as shock set in. Suspect down, she heard Radley say into his radio, his voice strangely calm. Shot fired. Need an ambulance. Through the haze of pain, Gabriella saw her wallet on the ground, opened from the fall. Her Justice Department credentials gleamed under the streetlight, the golden badge clearly visible. More lights appeared as another patrol car arrived. Gabriella pressed her hands against her leg, feeling warm blood seeping through her fingers. Her law degree, her years of service, her work defending others' civil rights, none of it had protected her when it mattered. What happened? Asked the second officer, a younger man who looked shocked at the scene. She reached for something, Radley said defensively. I thought it was a weapon. The younger officer looked at the wallet on the ground, then at Gabriella bleeding in the car doorway. His face showed the first flicker of doubt. Officer, Gabriella managed to say through gritted teeth, I need you to call this number. She recited her boss's cell phone from memory. Tell United States Attorney Gregory Phillips that his lead civil rights prosecutor has been shot during a traffic stop. The color drained from the young officer's face as he realized who she was. In the distance, sirens wailed, growing louder. Gabriella's vision began to blur at the edges, but she fought to stay conscious. This wouldn't be buried or explained away. She was a federal attorney who specialized in police misconduct cases. She knew the system from the inside, knew its flaws and its strengths. And when she recovered, because she would recover, Officer Radley would learn that the law he claimed to uphold applied to him too. As the ambulance arrived and paramedics rushed toward her, Gabriella made a silent promise to herself and to everyone who had faced similar injustice without her resources or platform. This wouldn't end here. Not by a long shot. The harsh fluorescent lights of County General Hospital buzzed overhead as Gabriella drifted in and out of consciousness. The paramedics had given her something for the pain during the ambulance ride, and now everything seemed distant and foggy. Voices floated around her as medical staff worked quickly, cutting away her bloodied pant leg and assessing the damage. Gunshot wound to the right thigh, a nurse called out, her voice professional and calm. Bleeding is under control, but she's lost a significant amount. A doctor leaned over Gabriella, his face coming into focus briefly. Mrs. Suarez, can you hear me? You're at County General. We're going to take care of you. Gabriella tried to nod but wasn't sure if she managed it. Her thoughts were scattered like puzzle pieces she couldn't quite fit together. The memory of the officer's face, the sound of the gunshot, the disbelief that this was happening to her. It all swirled together in a confusing haze. We need to get her to surgery, the doctor said to someone Gabriella couldn't see. The bullet may have hit the femoral artery. More movement, more voices. Gabriella felt herself being transferred to another bed, then rolling down a hallway. She forced her eyes open, trying to ground herself in reality. "My phone," she managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. "Need to call?" "My office." The nurse walking alongside her gurney leaned closer. "The police have your belongings. Once you're out of surgery, we can help you make calls. Right now, we need to focus on getting you fixed up." Gabriella wanted to protest, to explain that this wasn't just any surgery, this was evidence. Every moment that passed without proper documentation, without witnesses from her office present, was a moment the system could use to protect Officer Radley rather than hold him accountable. But the medication pulled her under before she could form the words. United States Attorney Gregory Phillips was reviewing case notes at his dining room table when his phone rang. The number wasn't familiar, but as the head federal prosecutor for the district, late-night calls weren't unusual. "Phillips," he answered, setting down his reading glasses. "Sir, this is Officer Chen with the Metropolitan Police Department." The young man's voice sounded tense. "I'm calling about one of your attorneys, Gabriela Suarez." Phillips sat up straighter, instantly alert. "What about her?" "There's been an incident, sir. Ms. Suarez was shot during a traffic stop about 40 minutes ago. She's been transported to County General Hospital." "Shot?" Phillips repeated, his mind struggling to process the information. "What do you mean she was shot?" "By whom?" A pause on the line. "By an officer, sir. Officer Radley. He claims Ms. Suarez was reaching for what he thought was a weapon." Phillips was already on his feet, grabbing his car keys and jacket. "That's absurd. Gabriela Suarez is one of my lead civil rights attorneys. She knows exactly how to behave during a police stop. Sir, she asked specifically for you to be contacted." "I'm on my way to the hospital now," Phillips said, his voice hard with controlled anger. "And Officer Chen? I want every piece of evidence preserved. Body cam footage, dash cam, radio communications, everything. If anything mysteriously disappears, I will personally see to it that obstruction of justice charges are filed. Am I clear?" "Yes, sir," Officer Chen replied, sounding both intimidated and relieved. "I'll make sure everything is secured." Phillips ended the call and immediately dialed another number as he headed for his car. "Lisa, it's Greg. I need you to assemble the civil rights team right now. Gabriela Suarez has been shot by a police officer during a traffic stop." He paused, listening to his deputy's shocked response. "Yes, that's right. Meet me at County General, and Lisa, bring a photographer and get statements from everyone. This isn't going away." Officer Radley sat in the station's break room, a cup of untouched coffee growing cold in front of him. His sergeant, a heavyset man named Donahue, stood across from him with his arms folded. "Run it by me again," Donahue said, his expression unreadable. "From the beginning," Radley sighed, running a hand through his short hair. "I pulled her over for a broken taillight. Was her taillight actually broken?" Donahue interrupted. Radley hesitated. "I thought I saw a flicker. Maybe it was intermittent?" Donahue's frown deepened. "Continue." She was immediately confrontational, throwing her government position around like it meant she was above being stopped. When I asked for her license, she made a sudden movement toward her bag. I saw something metallic and reacted. The metallic object being her federal ID badge, Donahue stated flatly. "I couldn't tell what it was in the moment," Radley insisted, a defensive edge creeping into his voice. "It happened fast. You know how these situations can escalate in seconds." Donahue pulled a chair out and sat down, leaning forward with his elbows on the table. "Kevin, I've known you for 8 years, so I'm going to be straight with you. The dashcam footage doesn't match your story." Radley's face paled slightly. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I've watched it 3 times now, and at no point does she appear confrontational. In fact, she's textbook cooperative. Hands visible, movement slow, clearly announcing what she's doing before she does it." Donahue paused, letting his words sink in. "And your body cam picked up every word you said to her, including that 'you people' comment." "That wasn't about her race," Radley protested. "I meant lawyers, government types." Donahue's expression made it clear he didn't believe him. "Internal Affairs is already involved. The FBI will be by morning. Do you understand what you've done? You shot a federal civil rights attorney who specializes in police misconduct cases. It was a split-second decision. It was a bad decision." Donahue cut him off. "And now we're all going to pay for it." He stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You're on administrative leave, effective immediately. Turn in your badge and gun before you leave." You're taking her side? Without even a full investigation? Radley's voice rose in disbelief. Donahue leaned in, lowering his voice. There are already news vans outside. By morning, this will be national. The department is going to distance itself from you as fast as possible, and I don't have the political capital to stop it. My advice, lawyer up today. The surgery lasted 3 hours. The bullet had missed Gabriella's femoral artery by millimeters but had shattered a section of her femur. When she finally woke in the recovery room, the first face she saw was Gregory Phillips, her boss. Sitting in a chair beside her bed, Greg, she whispered, her throat dry and scratchy. Phillips leaned forward, relief evident on his tired face. There you are. How are you feeling? Like I've been shot, Gabriella replied, attempting a weak smile. How bad is it? The surgery went well. The doctor says you'll need physical therapy, but with time you should regain full function. Phillips hesitated, then added, it could have been much worse. Gabriella closed her eyes briefly, the reality of the situation washing over her anew. He shot me for no reason, Greg. I was following every rule, doing everything right. I know, Phillips said quietly. We've seen the dash cam footage. Officer Chen made sure it was preserved. Chen? The younger officer who arrived after? Phillips nodded. He called me directly, just like you asked. He seemed troubled by what happened. He might be a valuable witness. Gabriella tried to shift position and winced at the pain that shot through her leg. What's happening with Radley? He's on administrative leave pending investigation. The department is already trying to control the damage. Your shooting is the lead story on every local channel, and CNN just picked it up. Phillips leaned closer. Gabriella, I know this isn't what you want to hear right now, but you're in a unique position. You're not just a victim. You're a federal prosecutor with the authority and knowledge to ensure this case is handled properly. You want me to lead my own shooting investigation? Gabriella asked incredulously. No, of course not. Lisa will handle the official side. But your perspective, your experience, both as a civil rights attorney and now as a victim of police violence, that's powerful. When you're ready, your testimony could change things. Gabriella looked down at her bandaged leg, then back at her boss. When I was lying there on the ground, bleeding, I made myself a promise that this wouldn't be buried, that Radley wouldn't get away with it. Her voice strengthened with each word. I've spent my career fighting for others. I never thought I'd be fighting for myself in the same way. A knock at the door interrupted them. A nurse entered, followed by 2 people Gabriella recognized from her team at the Justice Department. Sorry to disturb you, the nurse said, checking Gabriella's vital signs. But these 2 insisted on seeing you, and Dr. Henderson approved a short visit. We came as soon as we heard, said Raj, a fellow attorney who had worked with Gabriella for 3 years. Beside him, Maria, their paralegal, held a small bouquet of flowers. The whole office is in shock, Maria added, placing the flowers on the bedside table. Everyone's asking what they can do to help. Gabriella felt a surge of emotion at their concern. Right now I need someone to document everything. My injuries, the hospital reports, witness statements from the medical staff who treated me, everything. Raj nodded, already taking notes on his phone. Consider it done. The team is mobilizing as we speak. And Gabriella? The community is rallying too. There's already a candlelight vigil planned for tomorrow night. Phillips's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and his expression tightened. The police commissioner just released a statement calling your shooting a tragic mistake and promising a thorough investigation. A mistake? Gabriella repeated, anger flaring through her pain. Is that what they're calling it? It's just the opening move, Phillips assured her. They're trying to frame the narrative. But we have the facts, the evidence, and most importantly, we have you. A living witness who knows exactly how the system works and how to fight it. Gabriella looked around at the small group gathered in her hospital room, her colleagues, her friends, her allies in the coming battle. The path ahead would be difficult. She would have to heal not just physically but emotionally from the trauma of the shooting. She would face resistance, excuses, perhaps even threats. But in this moment, she wasn't alone. Then let's make sure this mistake has consequences, she said, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. Because the next person Radley pulls over might not have the Justice Department behind them. Outside her window, the first light of dawn was breaking over the city. A new day, and with it the beginning of a fight for justice that would change more lives than just her own. 3 days after the shooting, Gabriella's hospital room had transformed into an unofficial command center. Flowers crowded every surface. Cards from colleagues and strangers alike lined the windowsill, and a steady stream of visitors kept the nursing staff busy enforcing visiting hours. But more importantly, the small table beside her bed held stacks of documents, a laptop, and a recorder for taking official statements. Lisa Torres, deputy U.S. attorney and Gabriella's close friend, tapped her pen against a legal pad as she spoke. The police chief is holding a press conference at 4 today. Word is he's going to announce an expedited investigation while asking the public for patience. Gabriella adjusted her position in the bed, grimacing as pain shot through her leg despite the medication. Translation: they're stalling while they figure out how to protect Radley and minimize the department's liability. Maybe not this time, Raj said from his spot by the window. He turned his tablet around to show a news website. The protests are growing. Last night there were over 2,000 people outside police headquarters. Gabriella studied the image of the crowd, holding candles and signs bearing her name alongside others who hadn't survived their encounters with police. The sight filled her with complicated emotions: gratitude for the support, sadness for the circumstances, determination to use this moment for change. "What's the latest on the body cam footage?" she asked, returning to the practical matters at hand. Lisa exchanged a glance with Raj before answering. "There's a development on that front. Officer Chen came forward this morning with information that Radley may have attempted to tamper with his footage." Gabriella sat up straighter despite her pain. "What kind of tampering?" According to Chen, Radley asked another officer in tech to help him clean up some audio before submitting it. The tech officer refused and reported it to his supervisor. Lisa's expression was grim but satisfied. "They've added potential evidence tampering to the investigation." "Chen is taking a huge risk," Gabriella said quietly. "The blue wall of silence isn't easy to break through." "He said something interesting when I interviewed him yesterday," Raj added. "He said seeing you on the ground, bleeding from a gunshot wound while still trying to make sure proper procedures were followed, it made him question what he was really protecting by staying silent." A knock at the door interrupted their conversation. A nurse poked her head in. "Mrs. Suarez? There's someone from the FBI here to see you. Agent Daniels." Gabriella nodded and the nurse stepped aside to allow a tall woman in a dark suit to enter. Agent Daniels had a no-nonsense expression and carried a slim briefcase. "Ms. Suarez," she said with a brief nod, "I'm leading the federal investigation into your shooting. I have some questions if you're feeling up to it." "I've been waiting for the FBI to get involved," Gabriella replied. "And yes, I'm definitely up for questions." Lisa stood. "We'll give you some privacy." "Actually," Agent Daniels interrupted, "as this is now a federal civil rights investigation, I'd prefer if you stayed. Ms. Suarez's legal team should be present for this interview." Gabriella and Lisa exchanged surprised looks. The FBI treating this as a civil rights case from the outset was significant. Agent Daniels pulled up a chair and opened her briefcase. "Let me be direct, Ms. Suarez. The evidence we've reviewed so far, the dashcam footage, witness statements, and Officer Radley's history, presents a disturbing picture. This appears to be a clear-cut case of excessive force with potential racial motivations." "Radley's history?" Gabriella repeated. "You found something?" "We've pulled his record from 3 different departments. He transferred twice in 8 years." Agent Daniels removed a folder and opened it. Each transfer followed civilian complaints about aggressive behavior, particularly toward people of color. "None resulted in disciplinary action, but the pattern is clear." "Department hopping," Lisa murmured, "a classic way to escape accountability." "Exactly." Agent Daniels looked directly at Gabriella. "The FBI director has taken a personal interest in your case. We believe it represents a broader pattern of behavior that merits federal charges." Gabriella absorbed this information, a mix of vindication and sadness washing over her. "So what happens next?" "We'll continue gathering evidence while the U.S. Attorney's Office prepares potential charges." Agent Daniels glanced at Lisa. "I understand there may be a conflict of interest given Mrs. Suarez's position, but we're prepared to work with special counsel if necessary. The Attorney General has already appointed someone from the Eastern District to handle prosecution," Lisa confirmed. "We want this case airtight." Outside the window, a helicopter thudded overhead, its noise momentarily drowning out their conversation. When they could hear again, Agent Daniels leaned forward. "There's something else you should know. We've received information that certain elements within the police union are pressuring Officer Chen to recant his statements. He's been reassigned to desk duty supposedly for his own protection. They're isolating him," Gabriella said, anger flaring, "making an example of what happens when you break ranks. We've offered him protection, but he's reluctant to accept. Says it would only confirm the narrative that he's chosen the wrong side." Agent Daniels closed her folder. "He may need some encouragement from someone he respects." Gabriella nodded, understanding the unspoken request. "I'd like to speak with him. Not to influence his testimony, but to let him know he's not alone in this." Officer Chen sat uncomfortably in the hospital cafeteria, his coffee untouched on the table. He wore civilian clothes, jeans and a plain button-down shirt, but his rigid posture screamed law enforcement. "Thank you for coming," Gabriella said, maneuvering her wheelchair across from him. Her leg was propped up, the bulky bandages visible beneath her hospital gown and robe. Chen nodded, his eyes briefly flickering to her injured leg before meeting her gaze. "How are you feeling? Physically or emotionally?" Gabriella asked with a small smile. "Both, I guess. Physically, I'm looking at months of recovery and physical therapy. Emotionally," she paused, "I'm still processing, but I'm alive, which is more than many people can say after similar encounters." Chen winced slightly at her words. "I'm sorry about what happened." "I should have." "You did the right thing," Gabriella interrupted gently. "You secured the evidence. You made the call to my boss, and now you're telling the truth about what you saw and heard. That's all anyone can ask. The department doesn't see it that way." Chen stared down at his coffee. "My locker was vandalized yesterday. Someone spray-painted rat across it." Gabriella's expression softened with understanding. "I know this isn't easy. The system is designed to protect itself, and right now you're a threat to that system." "I didn't sign up to protect bad cops," Chen said, a hint of defiance in his voice. "I became an officer to help people, to make a difference in my community. What Radley did, that's not what we're supposed to stand for. And yet it happens too often," Gabriella pointed out. "The question is, what are we going to do about it?" Chen finally met her eyes directly. "The FBI wants me to testify about Radley trying to alter his body cam footage. If I do that, my career is over. No department will touch me after that. Maybe," Gabriella acknowledged. "Or maybe this case will help change the culture that punishes officers who speak out. Reform has to start somewhere, with someone brave enough to stand up." Chen was quiet for a long moment. "You know, when I was in the academy, they taught us about the thin blue line, how officers need to stick together because no one else understands what we go through. I believed in that. But watching Radley shoot you for no reason, I keep thinking, what if that had been my sister? My mother? Would I still believe the line then? The true thin blue line should be between good policing and bad policing, not between police and accountability," Gabriella said. "Officers like you are essential to rebuilding trust between law enforcement and the communities they serve." "If I testify," Chen said slowly, "I want assurances that this won't be swept under the rug. That Radley won't get a slap on the wrist and then get hired by another department a few counties over." Gabriella nodded. "I can't promise results, but I can promise that the full weight of the Justice Department will be behind this case. And personally, I'll be watching it every step of the way." The crowd outside the police headquarters had swelled to nearly 5,000 by the time Police Chief Rodriguez stepped up to the microphone. News cameras from local and national outlets captured his grave expression as he cleared his throat. 3 days ago, an incident occurred that has shaken our community's trust in those sworn to protect and serve Camaro, he began. Federal Attorney Gabriela Suarez was shot during what should have been a routine traffic stop. I want to be clear, what happened was unacceptable. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. This wasn't the defensive stance they had expected. After reviewing the evidence and consulting with the district attorney's office, I have made the decision to terminate Officer Kevin Radley's employment with this department, effective immediately. Furthermore, we are fully cooperating with the FBI's investigation into potential civil rights violations. The crowd erupted in surprised cheers and applause. Signs bearing Gabriela's name and face waved in the air. Chief Rodriguez raised his hands for quiet. This is only a first step. One officer's actions don't represent our entire department, but they do highlight the need for systemic changes. Today, I am announcing the formation of a civilian oversight committee with real power to review officer conduct and recommend disciplinary action when necessary. Back in her hospital room, Gabriella watched the press conference on television with Gregory Phillips standing beside her bed. "He's actually doing it," she said, somewhat stunned. "I never thought Rodriguez would go this far." "Public pressure is part of it," Phillips acknowledged. "But I think Chen's testimony was the tipping point. Once it became clear that other officers were willing to speak out, Rodriguez had to choose which side of history he wanted to be on." Gabriella's phone buzzed with an incoming text. It was from Lisa. "DA just called. They're filing criminal charges against Radley tomorrow. Assault with a deadly weapon, attempted evidence tampering, and civil rights violations." A complex mix of emotions washed over Gabriella: relief, vindication, and a quiet determination. This was just the beginning of a longer fight. But it was a beginning with momentum. "When I was lying on the pavement that night," she said to Phillips, "I made a promise that this wouldn't be buried or forgotten. I never imagined things would move this quickly." "It's moving quickly because of who you are and what you represent," Phillips replied. "The challenge now is to ensure that the same swift justice would happen if the victim were anyone else." Gabriella nodded, her gaze returning to the television where protesters continued to fill the streets, demanding accountability and change. "Then that's our next fight." 2 weeks after the shooting, Gabriella sat in a wheelchair at the back of a packed courtroom, watching as Officer Kevin Radley was led in, wearing a dark suit instead of his uniform. The irony wasn't lost on her. How many times had she stood in this very courtroom as a prosecutor, watching defendants enter with their freedom hanging in the balance? Now she was here as a victim, about to witness the man who shot her face charges for the first time. Lisa sat beside her, a steadying presence as cameras flashed from the press section. The case had captured national attention, becoming a flashpoint in the ongoing conversation about police accountability and racial bias in law enforcement. Outside, protesters lined the courthouse steps, their chants occasionally audible through the thick walls. "All rise," the bailiff called as Judge Harriet Walker entered the courtroom. As everyone stood, Gabriella, remaining in her wheelchair with her bandaged leg extended, she caught Radley's eye briefly. His expression was unreadable, though she thought she detected a flicker of surprise at seeing her there in person. Perhaps he'd expected her to still be confined to a hospital bed. Perhaps he'd hoped she wouldn't be there to face him. District Attorney Miguel Vasquez approached the podium after the judge was seated. "Your Honor, the state charges Kevin Radley with assault with a deadly weapon, official misconduct, tampering with evidence, and violation of civil rights under color of law. Given the serious nature of these charges and the defendant's potential flight risk, we request bail be set at $500,000. Radley's attorney, a sharp-featured woman named Victoria Powell, immediately objected. "Your Honor, my client is a decorated police officer with 12 years of service. He has strong ties to the community and no criminal record. We request release on his own recognizance." Judge Walker, known for her no-nonsense approach, peered over her glasses at Powell. "Counsel, your client is accused of shooting a federal attorney during a routine traffic stop and then attempting to alter evidence. I'm inclined to agree with the prosecution's concerns." After further arguments, the judge set bail at $350,000. As the proceedings continued, Gabriella observed Radley's demeanor closely. Gone was the aggressive confidence she'd witnessed during their encounter. Now he appeared subdued, occasionally whispering to his attorney but otherwise remaining still. "How are you holding up?" Lisa whispered as the attorneys approached the bench for a private conversation with the judge. "I'm okay," Gabriella replied, though the throbbing in her legs suggested otherwise. Her physical therapist had warned against overdoing it, but she'd been determined to attend this hearing in person. It's strange being on this side of the courtroom. When the hearing concluded, Radley was led away to arrange his bail. As Gabriella wheeled toward the exit with Lisa at her side, reporters called out questions, camera flashes popping like lightning around them. "Mrs. Suarez, how do you feel about the charges? Will you be testifying against Officer Radley? Do you believe justice is being served?" Lisa stepped in front of the wheelchair, blocking the reporters. "Mrs. Suarez has no comment at this time. Please respect her privacy as she continues to recover from her injuries." Gabriella felt a wave of gratitude for her friend's protection. The media attention had been overwhelming. Her story plastered across newspapers, dissected on cable news, debated on social media. While part of her welcomed the spotlight as a catalyst for change, another part longed for privacy to process her trauma without an audience. Later that afternoon, Gabriella sat in her apartment propped up on her couch with her leg elevated. It was her first week home from the hospital, and the adjustment had been challenging. Simple tasks like showering or preparing meals had become complicated productions, requiring planning and assistance. Her mother had flown in from Arizona to help, and today was bustling around the kitchen preparing dinner. "Mama, you don't have to cook enough for an army," Gabriella called out, smiling as she heard pots and pans clanging. Elena Suarez appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a dish towel. At 62, she still moved with the energy of someone decades younger, though worry had etched new lines around her eyes since her daughter's shooting. "Your colleagues are coming over to discuss the case, no? They need to eat." Her tone made it clear this wasn't up for debate. "Besides, you're too thin." "Hospital food," she added with disapproval. Gabriella couldn't help but smile. Some things never changed, no matter the circumstances. "They're just coming to update me on the investigation. Not for a dinner party. In this house, we feed people who are helping us," Elena replied simply. Returning to the kitchen, Gabriella's phone buzzed with a text from Raj. "Big news. We'll explain when we arrive." 20 men out. Her curiosity piqued. Gabriella tried to focus on the legal brief she'd been reviewing. Work had become a welcome distraction from her recovery, but found her attention wandering. The pain medication made it difficult to concentrate for long periods, and her thoughts kept returning to Radley's face in the courtroom. Had she seen remorse there or just concern for his own fate? The doorbell rang at precisely 6 o'clock. Elena answered it, and soon Raj, Lisa, and Officer Chen, now Detective Chen following his recent promotion, were seated in Gabriella's living room, plates of her mother's famous enchiladas in hand. "This is incredible, Mrs. Suarez," Chen said appreciatively after his first bite. Elena beamed with approval before excusing herself to give them privacy. "I'll be in the guest room if you need anything, mija," she told Gabriella, squeezing her shoulder gently as she passed. Once she'd gone, Gabriella looked expectantly at her colleagues. "So what's this big news?" Lisa and Raj exchanged glances before Lisa spoke. "The police union officially withdrew their support for Radley this afternoon. They're not providing legal funding or representation." Gabriella's eyebrows rose in surprise. Police unions typically stood by officers regardless of circumstances, often funding expensive legal defenses even in the most egregious cases of misconduct. "That's unprecedented," she said slowly. "What changed?" "Two more officers came forward," Chen explained, setting down his fork. "After I testified about Radley trying to alter the body cam footage, they decided to break their silence too. Apparently Radley has a history of making racist comments during shifts and escalating encounters with people of color. The union realized they couldn't defend the indefensible, especially with the national spotlight on this case," Raj added. "They're trying to salvage their public image by cutting him loose." Gabriella absorbed this information, feeling a complex mix of emotions. On one hand, it represented a significant crack in the blue wall that typically protected officers from consequences. On the other, it felt more like a strategic decision than a moral one. "What does this mean for the case?" she asked. "It means Radley is on his own," Lisa replied. "His private attorney is good, but without union backing, his resources are limited. More importantly, it sends a message to the jury pool that even his fellow officers don't support his actions." "There's more," Chen said, his expression serious. "The FBI investigation has uncovered 3 previous incidents where Radley used excessive force against minority suspects. All were swept under the rug through departmental interference. 2 of the victims have agreed to testify about their experiences." Gabriella leaned back against the couch cushions, wincing slightly as she adjusted her position. "So this really wasn't just about me. I was just the one with enough power and visibility that they couldn't ignore it. That's why this case matters so much," Raj said earnestly. "It's not just about getting justice for you. It's about changing the system that protected Radley until he shot someone the system couldn't ignore." A heavy silence fell over the room as they all contemplated the weight of what they were undertaking. It wasn't just a criminal case anymore. It was becoming a referendum on police accountability itself. The U.S. Attorney's Office has something else to discuss with you, Lisa said, breaking the silence. They want you to consider being the public face of a new task force on police reform once you're recovered enough to return to work. Your unique perspective as both a federal prosecutor and a victim of police violence would be powerful. Gabriella blinked in surprise. A task force? With actual authority? Lisa nodded. With teeth. The Attorney General is personally backing it. They're talking subpoena power, the ability to review departments nationwide and make binding recommendations. It would mean putting yourself out there even more, Chen cautioned. The spotlight would be intense. Gabriella glanced down at her injured leg, still heavily bandaged beneath her loose pants. The doctors had told her she might always walk with a slight limp, a permanent reminder of that night. But maybe that reminder could serve a purpose beyond her personal pain. I need to think about it, she said finally, but I'm not opposed to the idea. 3 days later, Gabriella sat in her physical therapist's office, gripping the parallel bars as sweat beaded on her forehead. Each step sent pain shooting through her leg, but she pushed forward, determined to regain her strength. That's it, encouraged Diego, her therapist. Just 3 more steps. You're doing great. Gabriella gritted her teeth and took another step, then another. Her arms trembled with the effort of supporting her weight, but she refused to give up. The final step complete, she allowed herself to sink into the wheelchair Diego positioned behind her. Your progress is remarkable, he said, handing her a towel to wipe her face. Most patients take much longer to reach this stage after the kind of injury you sustained. I don't have the luxury of a slow recovery, Gabriella replied, catching her breath. Radley's trial starts in 4 months. I need to be able to walk into that courtroom on my own 2 feet. Diego nodded, understanding the determination that drove her. At this rate, you will be. But recovery isn't just physical, you know. How are you doing with the other aspects? Gabriella knew he was referring to the psychological trauma, the nightmares that still woke her, the flinch she couldn't control when she saw police lights, the moments of panic that sometimes overtook her without warning. I started therapy last week, she admitted. It's harder than this in some ways. Physical pain I can push through. The other stuff is more complicated. It's all part of the same journey, Diego said gently. Give yourself permission to heal at different rates in different ways. As their session ended and she wheeled toward the waiting room, where her mother would pick her up, Gabriella's phone rang. It was Gregory Phillips, Gabriella, he said when she answered, his voice tense. Radley's attorney just contacted us. They want to discuss a plea deal. Gabriella felt her heart rate quicken. What kind of deal? They're offering a guilty plea to reduce charges. No jail time, just probation and surrender of his badge. No, Gabriella said immediately, her voice firm. That's not acceptable. He shot me, Greg. He tried to cover it up. If he'd done this to someone without my connections, he might have gotten away with it entirely. I told them you'd say that, Phillips replied, and she could hear the approval in his voice. But I needed to present the offer. The DA and I are on the same page. We're proceeding to trial unless they come back with something that includes significant jail time. As she ended the call, Gabriella saw her mother waiting by the reception desk. Elena looked at her questioningly, noting the determined set of her daughter's jaw. Everything okay, mija? Gabriella nodded, a new resolve strengthening her voice. Yes, I just made an important decision. She paused, then added, I'm going to accept that position with the task force, and I'm going to make sure Radley's case sets a precedent that can't be ignored. Elena smiled, pride shining in her eyes as she helped her daughter from the wheelchair into the car. You always were a fighter, even as a little girl. Some things never change. Some things do change, though, Gabriella replied, thinking of Chen and the other officers who had broken ranks to stand for what was right. And sometimes they change because we make them change. 4 months later, Gabriella stood before the full-length mirror in her bedroom, adjusting the collar of her blazer. The navy suit was one of her favorites, chosen deliberately for today, the opening day of Kevin Radley's trial. Her fingers moved to the small gold scales of justice pin on her lapel, a gift from her mother for her first day as a federal prosecutor years ago. The woman reflected in the mirror looked different from the one who had been shot that night. Her face was thinner, with new lines around her eyes that spoke of pain and sleepless nights. But there was something else too, a steely resolve that hadn't been there before, a first-hand understanding of what was at stake in her work. Gabriella reached for the cane propped against her dresser. After months of grueling physical therapy, she could walk short distances without it. But for longer periods, like a day in court, she still needed its support. The polished wood felt solid in her hand, grounding her. "You ready?" Lisa called from the living room. "As ready as I'll ever be," Gabriella replied, taking a deep breath and walking carefully out of the bedroom. Lisa gave her an appraising look. "You look like you mean business." "I do." Gabriella checked her watch. "Let's go. I want to be there early." The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters and protesters, some supporting Gabriella and others, a much smaller group, backing Radley. Police officers formed a line, creating a path to the entrance. Gabriella felt a flutter of anxiety at the sight of the uniforms, but pushed through it, her cane tapping rhythmically on the stone steps as cameras flashed around her. Inside, the courtroom was already nearly full. Gabriella made her way to her seat in the front row behind the prosecution table. As a victim, she would be both witness and observer in these proceedings. District Attorney Vasquez nodded to her respectfully as he organized his notes. At exactly 9 a.m., the bailiff called the court to order. Judge Walker entered, followed shortly by Radley and his attorney. Gabriella watched him closely as he took his seat at the defense table. He looked thinner too, the stress of the past months evident in the slump of his shoulders and the tightness around his mouth. The jury selection had been completed. The previous week, a diverse group of 12 citizens who had sworn to consider the evidence impartially. Now they filed in, their expressions serious as they took their seats. D.A. Vasquez rose for his opening statement, his voice clear and measured as he addressed the jury. "This case is about abuse of power in its most dangerous form," he began. "It's about an officer who used his badge and gun not to protect and serve, but to intimidate and harm. The evidence will show that Officer Kevin Radley stopped Ms. Gabriela Suarez without cause, escalated a routine traffic stop with racist remarks, and then shot her when she was fully complying with his instructions. And when he realized his actions were indefensible, he attempted to alter evidence to protect himself." Gabriella listened as Vasquez laid out the facts of that night, each detail bringing the memories flooding back. The flash of red and blue lights, Radley's aggressive tone, the shocking pain of the bullet tearing through her leg. She kept her expression composed, aware that the jurors would be watching her reactions. Defense attorney Powell's opening statement painted a very different picture. One of a dedicated officer making a split-second decision in what he perceived as a threatening situation. A tragic mistake rather than a malicious act. Police officers must make life or death decisions in fractions of seconds, Powell told the jury. Officer Radley saw what he believed was a threat and reacted according to his training. Was it a mistake? Yes, but was it a crime? The evidence will show that it was not. The trial proceeded with a parade of witnesses. The emergency medical technicians who had responded to the scene described finding Gabriella bleeding on the ground, still conscious, and asking them to document everything. The emergency room doctor testified about the severity of her injury and the surgeries required to repair the damage. On the third day, Officer Chen took the stand. Now wearing a detective's badge, he spoke clearly about arriving at the scene and finding Radley standing over Gabriella, about the discrepancies he immediately noticed between what Radley claimed had happened and what Chen observed, and about Radley's later attempt to alter his body cam footage. "And what made you decide to report Officer Radley's actions?" De Vasquez asked. Chen paused, his gaze moving briefly to Gabriella before returning to the prosecutor. "Because it was wrong. What happened that night violated everything I believe about what it means to be a police officer. We're supposed to protect people, not harm them because of prejudice or power trips." During cross-examination, Powell tried to suggest that Chen had been motivated by ambition, turning on a fellow officer to advance his own career. Chen remained steady. "My career would have been safer if I'd stayed quiet," he replied. "Every officer knows that. I came forward because I couldn't live with myself if I didn't." On the fourth day, it was Gabriella's turn to testify. She walked slowly to the witness stand, leaving her cane behind to demonstrate to the jury how the injury still affected her. After being sworn in, she faced the courtroom, her gaze briefly meeting Radley's before she focused on Vasquez. For nearly 2 hours, she recounted every detail of the traffic stop and shooting, her voice steady even as she described the moment the bullet hit her. She explained how she had followed every procedure recommended for civilians during police encounters, how she had clearly announced her movements, how Radley's demeanor had changed when she identified herself as a federal attorney. "Did Officer Radley give you any warning before he fired his weapon?" Vasquez asked. "No," Gabriela replied. "He shouted, 'Gun!' But he fired almost simultaneously. There was no time for me to respond or explain that my wallet had fallen." Not a weapon. Powell's cross-examination was aggressive, attempting to find inconsistencies in Gabriela's account, or suggest that her memory might have been affected by the trauma and medication. Gabriela remained unflappable, answering each question clearly without being drawn into arguments. "Mrs. Suarez, is it possible that in the darkness and stress of the moment, your movements appeared threatening to Officer Radley?" Powell asked. Gabriela looked directly at the defense attorney. "No, it is not possible. I was meticulously careful with every movement because I understand how traffic stops work. I announced what I was doing before I did it. I kept my hands visible. There was nothing threatening about dropping a wallet. The trial lasted 2 weeks, with expert witnesses testifying about the ballistics, the angle of the shot, and the proper police procedures for traffic stops. The body cam and dash cam footage was played multiple times, analyzed frame by frame. The previously hidden records of complaints against Radley from his former departments were entered into evidence, establishing a pattern of aggressive behavior, particularly toward people of color. Finally, on a Wednesday afternoon, it was time for closing arguments. The courtroom was packed, with spectators lining the walls and reporters poised to rush out with the verdict. Vasquez stood before the jury one last time. "The evidence has shown beyond any reasonable doubt that Kevin Radley acted with reckless disregard for Mrs. Suarez's safety and rights. He initiated a stop without cause, escalated without provocation, and fired his weapon without justification. Then he tried to cover it up. This wasn't a mistake or a misunderstanding. It was a crime, committed by someone who was entrusted with a badge and betrayed that trust." Powell countered with an emotional appeal about the difficult nature of policing and the split-second decisions officers must make, urging the jury to consider reasonable doubt. After the judge's instructions, the jury filed out to begin deliberations. Gabriela and her team waited in a private conference room, the hours dragging by with tense conversation and endless cups of coffee. The call came late the next day. The jury had reached a verdict. As they re-entered the courtroom, Gabriela studied their faces, looking for clues, but their expressions revealed nothing. "On the count of assault with a deadly weapon, how do you find?" Judge Walker asked the jury foreperson. "We find the defendant guilty," came the clear response. Gabriela closed her eyes briefly, a wave of emotion washing over her as the guilty verdicts continued for each charge. Beside her, Lisa squeezed her hand in silent support. 2 weeks later, Judge Walker sentenced Radley to 7 years in prison with no possibility of parole for at least 5 years. As the former officer was led away in handcuffs, his eyes met Gabriela's one final time. She saw many things in his expression, anger certainly, but also what might have been a flicker of understanding that justice had been served. 1 year later, Gabriela stood at a podium in Washington, D.C., addressing a congressional committee on police reform. The hearing room was filled with lawmakers, advocates, law enforcement representatives, and media. "The incident that brought me before you today is not unique," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the room. "What is unique is that I had the resources, knowledge, and platform to ensure accountability. Most victims of police misconduct do not." She no longer needed a cane, though she would always walk with a slight limp. The physical wounds had healed better than expected, though the psychological ones still surfaced occasionally in nightmares or moments of anxiety when she saw flashing police lights. The Police Accountability Task Force I now lead has spent the past year reviewing departments across the country. Gabriela continued. "We've identified patterns of misconduct that persist because the systems designed to prevent them are fundamentally flawed. Today, I present our recommendations for federal legislation that would create meaningful change." From her seat in the gallery, Elena Suarez watched her daughter with pride, dabbing at tears that threatened to spill. Beside her sat Detective Chen, who had become an unexpected ally and friend throughout the past year, working closely with Gabriela's task force to provide an insider's perspective on police culture. Our recommendations include mandatory body cameras with strict penalties for tampering, a national database tracking officer misconduct to prevent department hopping, civilian oversight boards with real authority, and comprehensive bias training with measurable outcomes, Gabriella explained, gesturing to the thick report before each committee member. But perhaps most importantly, she added, her voice softening slightly, we need to change the culture that values loyalty over integrity, that punishes officers who speak up when they witness misconduct. The true heroes in law enforcement are those who hold themselves and their colleagues to the highest standards. Her gaze found Chen in the crowd, acknowledging his courage with a slight nod. What happened to me was not just about one officer's actions. It was about a system that enabled those actions through years of looking the other way. The bullet that struck my leg shattered more than bone. It shattered my assumption that justice works the same for everyone. As she concluded her testimony, a wave of applause spread through the hearing room. The committee chair thanked her for her powerful words and assured her that the recommendations would be carefully considered in upcoming legislation. Later, as Gabriella and Chen walked down the Capitol steps together, reporters called out questions about the hearing and the proposed reforms. Do you think real change is possible? Chen asked quietly away from the microphones. Gabriella paused, looking out at the city spread before them, the monuments and buildings that represented American ideals of justice and equality, ideals that often fell short in practice. I have to believe it is, she replied. Not just possible, but inevitable if enough of us demand it. What happened to me was terrible, but if it helps create a system where it can't happen to others, then maybe it served a purpose. You could have just focused on your own recovery, your own case, Chen observed. Instead, you took on an entire system. Gabriella smiled slightly. Some fights choose you. You just have to decide whether to walk away or see them through. She glanced down at her leg, then back up at the Capitol dome gleaming in the afternoon sun. I'm not walking away. As they descended the remaining steps, Gabriella knew the road ahead would be long and difficult. Meaningful reform never came easily, but for the first time since that night when her life changed forever, she felt something that had been missing, not just hope that things could change, but the certainty that she would be part of making that change happen.